The dog came in on a Tuesday, draped across the arms of a man who hadn't slept in 2 days. Paramedic Neve Sorrento was finishing a chart at the nurse's station when the automatic doors blew open, and Sergeant First Class Dade Corvath walked through them like the building owed him something. His uniform was still field dusty, one sleeve torn at the shoulder seam, and the German shepherd in his arms had a wound on her left flank that had been field dressed with what looked like a strip of undershirt and a lot of hope. "She needs help," Corvath said, not begging, stating. Neve was already up. The dog's name was Voss, 12-year-old Belgian Malinois, military working dog, 7 years active. Corvath had her handler paperwork folded into his breast pocket, which he produced with one hand while keeping his other arm under her hindquarters. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Her eyes tracked Neve when she crouched down, which was a good sign. Dogs that had given up didn't bother to look at you. "What happened?" Neve asked, already running her fingers along Voss's ribcage. "ID fragment. 3 days ago. Vet on base pulled it, but the wound reopened on the transport. She's been this way since Fort Bliss. 3 days. The dog had been carrying this for 3 days. Neve stood. "Come with me." She had been a paramedic at St. Lucius Regional for 4 years. Before that, 2 years with an EMS unit in Tulsa. Before that, 1 year working veterinary transport in rural Oklahoma because it was the only medical job available and she needed the hours. She was 31 years old, had stitched up things in the back of moving vehicles that surgical residents would have flinched at, and she did not think twice about what she was about to do. She brought Corvath and Voss into Bay 4. She pulled the crash cart, not for the dog, but for the oxygen line and the monitoring equipment. She cut the field dressing away and looked at the wound. Deep puncture, partially closed, signs of early infection at the margins. The fragment had been removed cleanly, but the transport had done damage. Voss needed irrigation, proper closure, antibiotics, and fluids. She needed them now, not in 2 hours when the nearest veterinary emergency clinic on the other side of Clearwater County could be reached. Neve went to work. She was midway through cleaning the wound, Corvath standing at the head of the gurney with both hands on Voss's face, murmuring something low that the dog seemed to hear, when the curtain pulled back. Administrator Felice Drummond stood in the gap. She was 47, reed straight, with reading glasses pushed up on her head like a crown. She had been with St. Lucius for 11 years and ran the floor the way some people run marathons, relentlessly, without apparent enjoyment. "Sorrento." Neve didn't look up. "I'm in the middle of something." "You're in the middle of treating a dog, in a human medical bay, with hospital equipment. She'll be dead in 2 hours without intervention. The closest vet ER is 40 minutes with traffic and she's not stable enough for, that's not your decision to make. Someone has to make it." Neve looked up then, just for a second. "I'm making it." Drummond's jaw tightened. She looked at Corvath, then at the dog, then at the monitors Neve had running. "Sergeant, I understand this animal is important to you, but this facility is not equipped. She's been with me since 2018, Corvath said. His voice was very quiet. "She's pulled men out of burning vehicles. She's found 3 IED caches that saved the lives of 40 soldiers. She is not this animal." Drummond said nothing for a moment. Then, "Sorrento, wrap this up. Now." "In about 10 minutes, Neve said. "Now." Neve set down the irrigation syringe. She looked at Drummond with the kind of exhausted patience of someone who has had this exact argument before, in different rooms, with different people wearing different titles. "What would you like me to do, Felice? Stop mid-procedure? Walk away and let her go into septic shock? I would like you to recognize what your job is. My job is to help things that are suffering when I have the ability to help them." Neve picked the syringe back up. "That's what I'm doing." Drummond left. Neve finished. The wound was clean, properly closed. 4 stitches, irrigation, antibiotic coverage started. Fluids running. Voss had stopped panting and was lying with her head in Corvath's lap. Her breathing normalized. She licked his hand once, a slow drag of the tongue, and Neve saw something move across the sergeant's face that had nothing to do with military bearing. She stripped her gloves. She needs to stay on fluids for at least 2 hours. After that, she should be stable enough for transport to a proper veterinary facility. "Thank you," Corvath said. He said it like the words cost him something. "She's a good dog," Neve said. "I can see that." She stepped out of the bay and nearly walked into Drummond, who was waiting in the corridor with her arms crossed, and a man Neve didn't recognize standing at her shoulder. He was in administration khakis and had the look of someone who had just been fetched. "This is Mr. Holloway from HR," Drummond said. "He has something for you." Holloway held out an envelope. Neve took it. She read the first 2 lines. She read them again. "You're terminating me," she said. "Effective immediately," Drummond said. "You treated an animal with hospital equipment, ran facility resources without authorization, and disregarded a direct order from a supervisor. That's 3 violations of the employee conduct policy. She would have died. That's not our liability to manage." Neve folded the envelope. She was very still for a moment, and anyone watching her closely might have noticed her jaw shift, the way it does when someone is deciding whether to say the thing they're actually thinking or the thing they can survive saying. She chose survival. "I need to go back in and brief the sergeant on her care instructions. Security will escort you out once you've collected your personal items." "After I brief him," Drummond started to object, but Neve had already turned and walked back through the curtain. She spent 4 minutes with Korvath. She told him what to watch for, what Voss would need over the next 72 hours, which antibiotics to request from the base veterinary unit, and at what dosage. She wrote it on the back of a prescription notepad and pressed it into his hand. "They're firing you," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd heard enough through the curtain. "Looks that way because of Voss?" "Because of me," Neve said. "I made the call. That's on me." Korvath looked at her for a long moment. He had the kind of eyes that came from looking at hard things for a long time. "You have a card? Anything?" She didn't. She tore another sheet from the notepad and wrote her cell number on it. She didn't think much about it at the time. It was just a number. She walked out of Bay 4, past Drummond, past Holloway, down the corridor to the break room, where her jacket was hanging on a hook behind the door, and her bag was in the bottom of a shared locker. She packed methodically. Stethoscope. Spare set of scrubs. The framed photo her sister had given her of the 2 of them at the coast, summer before last. A half-eaten bag of almonds. The small spiral notebook she'd carried for 4 years with procedure notes and drug dosages and the occasional phone number. She zipped the bag. She put on her jacket. She picked up her keys, because her keys were with her bag, where she always kept them when she was working, a habit she'd developed after losing them twice in year 1. She walked past the nurse's station. Marguerite, who had worked with Neve since her first week, looked up and started to say something. Neve shook her head just slightly. "Not now." Marguerite pressed her lips together and gave a small nod. Neve walked through the automatic doors. It was a Tuesday afternoon, overcast, 54 degrees. She sat in her car in the parking lot for 7 minutes and didn't cry, which surprised her. She felt something, but it wasn't grief exactly. It was closer to the feeling you get when you've said the true thing and the room didn't receive it. A specific kind of alone. She drove home. The next 2 days were the kind of quiet that accumulates. She called her sister, who was furious on her behalf in the way only sisters can be. Loud and then suddenly practical, already researching wrongful termination attorneys. She called her landlord to let him know she'd need a few weeks before the next rent payment could be confirmed. She made coffee. She sat at her kitchen table with the morning light coming in and thought about all the things she should probably be doing and didn't do any of them. On the 3rd day, her phone rang. Number she didn't recognize. She answered, "Monsieur Sorrento." A man's voice, not Korvath. Older, measured, the kind of voice that had spent years in briefing rooms. "My name is Commander Aldous Rain. I'm with Naval Special Warfare Command." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay. I understand you treated a military working dog named Voss 3 days ago at St. Lucius Regional." "I did. I also understand you lost your position as a result." "Yes." A pause. Sergeant Korvath contacted his chain of command. The story moved up fairly quickly. Another pause, shorter. "Monsieur Sorrento, we'd like to come to the hospital." She set her coffee mug down. "Commander, I don't work there anymore. We're aware." His voice hadn't changed, still level, still quiet. "We'd still like to come to the hospital." She didn't ask why. She understood somewhere beneath language what he meant. "When?" she said. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. It would be helpful if you were there." She looked at her kitchen table, the morning light, the untouched stack of mail at the far end. "I'll be there," she said. She didn't sleep well. She told herself it was because of the uncertainty, but the truth was she kept thinking about Voss. About the moment the dog's breathing had evened out, The exact second it shifted from labored to steady, the way you could feel it in the room when a body stopped fighting and started healing. She thought about Corvath's hand on the dog's face. She thought about the note she'd written on the prescription pad. She arrived at 9:02. 2 minutes late because she couldn't find parking, which was the most absurd thing about all of it. This significant day beginning with a parking problem. She stood outside the automatic doors for a moment, watching her own reflection in the glass. She was still in her personal clothes. She didn't have her badge anymore. She was just a woman standing outside a hospital she used to work in. At 9:07, they arrived, 3 black SUVs. She heard them before she saw them, the specific cadence of multiple vehicle doors opening in sequence. Then she turned and they were there. 8 men in Navy working uniforms, moving with the particular economy of people who don't waste motion across the parking lot. Commander Rain was at the front. She recognized him from his bearing before she read his insignia. Behind him came 2 others she didn't recognize, and at the back of the group, in his service uniform now, carrying Voss on a lead, Corvath. The dog walked, slowly, favoring her left side, but she walked. The bandaging on her flank was clean and white. She had her head up. Neve felt something in her chest do something she couldn't quite name. Rain extended his hand. "Monsieur Sorrento, Commander, thank you for coming." He turned and looked at the hospital entrance. "Shall we?" They walked in together. The automatic doors opened, and then they were in the lobby, 8 Navy personnel and a military working dog in full kit, and the effect on the room was immediate. A man at the reception desk stood up. A woman at the far end of the waiting area lowered her phone. 3 nurses who had been moving through the lobby went still. Marguerite, who was behind the station, saw Neve first. Her hand went to her mouth. Drummond appeared from the administrative corridor. She was mid-sentence with someone, clipboard in hand, and she stopped when she registered what she was looking at. The color in her face went through 2 changes in rapid succession. Rain introduced himself to the front desk, calmly, factually, the way people introduce themselves when they don't need to impress anyone. He requested to speak with St. Lucius administration. He mentioned the words formal inquiry. He mentioned personnel decision. He mentioned military working dog Voss, currently under medical supervision as a direct result of intervention by your former employee. He was not loud. He didn't need to be. Drummond came forward. "Commander, I appreciate your concern, but the staffing decision regarding Miss Sorrento was made in accordance with—" "I'm not here to contest your authority," Rain said. "I'm here because one of our own was in critical condition, and one of your employees made a decision that saved her life. I'd like that to be on record." "On record with who?" Drummond said. "With the Department of the Navy, with Naval Special Warfare Command, and with you." He looked at her steadily. Mrs. Sorrento demonstrated precisely the kind of judgment that emergency medicine requires. She assessed a situation, identified the only viable course of action, and executed it without hesitation. That she was penalized for it is something we feel should be addressed. There was a silence in the lobby that had a particular quality to it. The kind of silence that doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everyone is processing something at the same speed. Drummond said, "I'll need to speak with our legal team." "Of course," Rain said. "We'll wait." He said it without irony, without threat, without any particular emphasis. He said it the way people say things they mean absolutely. They waited for 40 minutes. Neve sat in one of the waiting room chairs. Corvath sat beside her, Voss between them. The dog put her head on Neve's knee somewhere around the 20-minute mark, and Neve kept her hand on her back, feeling the slow rise and fall of her breathing. "How's she doing?" Neve asked. "Better than me most days," Corvath said. Neve almost smiled. The infection was caught early. She should make a full recovery. Doc at the base said the same thing. Said whoever did the initial work knew what they were doing. "I had a year in veterinary transport," Neve said. "It comes back fast." Corvath was quiet for a moment. "I've been in 17 years. I've seen a lot of people make the easy call. I don't see as many make the right one." Neve looked down at Voss. She wasn't going to make it to the other clinic. "I know," he said. "I know that." Drummond returned at 9:58. She was accompanied by a woman Neve didn't recognize, mid-50s blazer, the sort of efficient composure that comes from legal rather than medical work. They conferred briefly with Commander Rain in the corridor off the lobby. Neve watched without trying to read lips. She had decided, somewhere around the 25-minute mark, that she was done trying to manage outcomes. She had made the call. She would live with whatever came from it. The conference lasted 11 minutes. Drummond walked over to Neve. She stood for a moment without speaking, and Neve had the sense that something was being weighed and measured behind her eyes in real time. "We've reviewed the circumstances of your termination," Drummond said. "The legal team has advised that there are grounds for reconsideration given the context." Neve waited. "You'll be reinstated. Same position, same floor. Your record will reflect the original termination, but HR will append an administrative review outcome noting that the action was reversed." Neve said, "Will there be any notation about why it was reversed?" Drummond's jaw tightened. "There will be a notation that extenuating circumstances were identified during review." "That's fine," Neve said. "It wasn't everything. It wasn't an apology, wasn't an acknowledgement that the call had been right, wasn't any kind of reckoning with why a rule existed that would leave a living creature to die rather than complicate a liability spreadsheet. But it was enough to go back to work. And going back to work meant being there the next time something needed her." She stood up. Voss lifted her head, and Neve scratched behind her ears once, slow and deliberate, the way the dog seemed to like. "Good girl," she said. Commander Rain was waiting near the doors. He shook her hand again on the way out. "For what it's worth," he said, "you did the right thing." "I know," Neve said. "That's why it costs something." He looked at her for a moment, the kind of look that's actually an assessment, brief and accurate, and then nodded. He and his men filtered back through the lobby and out through the automatic doors. Corvith paused last. "She's going to need a check-in at 12 weeks, he said. "When we're back stateside, I'll be here," Neve said. He gave a single nod. Something in it that wasn't quite military-bearing and wasn't quite personal. It was something in between, the kind of acknowledgement exchanged between people who have been in the same room when something real happened and both know it. Then he was gone, and Voss with him, moving across the parking lot with her steady, careful gait, her handler's hand just above her back without touching, present, available, ready if she needed it. Neve stood in the lobby for a moment after the doors closed. Marguerite was at the station, watching her. Two of the other nurses had drifted close without being obvious about it. The man at the reception desk was still standing. She looked down at her hands. She was still wearing her personal clothes, still didn't have her badge. "I'm going to need a new badge," she said, to no one in particular. Marguerite reached under the desk and produced a visitor lanyard. She held it out with the careful dignity of someone presenting something important. "For now," she said. Neve took it. She put it around her neck. She walked toward the corridor that led to the floor. She had a shift to start.